Hello, my sweet summer children. Game of Thrones is over. Casket, funeral, it's over. But luckily for all of us who do not want to leave Westeros, I have some news on the new Game of Thrones prequel. In this video, I will tell you everything that I know about it so far and what I think about it. The filming for this prequel is going on right now. It has a working title called Bloodmoon. There were some filming leaks that are coming out, and we're going to talk about all of that. But let's get into it. In June 2018, we found out that HBO did indeed order a prequel. So Jane Goldman is the showrunner with George R.R. Martin as the co-producer. Jane Goldman is a very experienced screenwriter. She basically resurrected X-Men and made that franchise better than it ever was alongside Matthew Vaughn. She adapted Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, and she also did the Kingsman movies. So when HBO did the press release, they said basically what the prequel was about. Taking place thousands of years before the events of Game of Thrones, the series chronicles the world's descent from the golden age of heroes into its darkest hour. And only one thing is for sure, from the horrifying secrets of Westeros history to the true origin of the White Walkers, the mysteries of the East to the Starks of legend, it's not the story we think we know. Immediately, I was shook because you already know how I feel about the timeline. I always felt like the timeline was jacked up. But anyway, I was also shook because I want to know all the juicy details surrounding the Age of Heroes and the Long Nights and the White Walkers that I thought I was going to get from season 8. So George had mentioned the pilot on his blog. This one really puts the pre and prequel, since it is set not 90 years before Game of Thrones like Dunk and Egg, or a few hundred years, but rather 10,000 years, well, assuming the oral histories of the first men are accurate, but there are maesters at the Citadel who insist it has only been half that long. I've been saying that. So this was like a year ago, and we actually have some of the cast and filming has begun. We know more information now, so let's start with the cast. One of the leads is Naomi Watts, two-time Oscar winner. HBO is bringing out the big guns. Naomi Watts will play a charismatic socialite with a dark secret, and that's all we know. I actually heard through the grapevine that Naomi Watts is going to be playing a Blackwood. That would actually be really interesting because that's the house that Bloodraven descended from, House Blackwood. But I don't want to jump to conclusions because she don't give me Blackwood vibes. Anyway, so there's other, like, the cast is crazy. Josh Whitehouse, Naomi Ackie, Jamie Campbell Bower, Toby Regbo, Georgie Henley, Ivanhoe Jeremiah, Miranda Richardson, Denise Guff, Sheila Adam, John Sim, Marquise Rodriguez, Richard McCabe, John Heffernan, Dixie Edgar name butchery, and Alex Sharp. All of this amazing talent is on board for this prequel. So the prequel we likely won't be getting until next year at the least, which is 2020. But let's get into what the prequel is about, what we can expect from it. So in an interview with Entertainment Weekly, George is asked this. Since HBO's prequel pilot takes place 10,000 years before Game of Thrones, will that world even be recognizable to fans as Westeros since there's such a huge time jump? 10,000 years is mentioned in the novels, but you also have places where maesters say, no, it wasn't 10,000, it was 5,000. Again, I'm trying to reflect real life things that a lot of high fantasy doesn't reflect. In the Bible, it has people living for hundreds of years, and then people added up how long each lived and used that to figure out when events took place. Really? I don't think so. Now we're getting more realistic, dating now from carbon dating and archaeology, but Westeros doesn't have that. They're still in the stage of my grandfather told me and his grandfather told him. So I think it's closer to 5,000 years. But you're right, Westeros is a very different place. There's no King's Landing, there's no Iron Throne, there are no Targaryens. Valyria has hardly begun to rise yet with its dragons and the great empire that it built. We're dealing with a different and older world, and hopefully that will be part of the fun of this series. Again, George is pointing out the inconsistencies in the timeline. So George says that the Age of Heroes is before Targaryens and before dragons. The dragon timeline and when dragons came is up for debate. But according to the known timeline, Targaryens didn't come to Westeros before the doom of Valyria, and Valyria hasn't even began to rise yet. Although it could rise during the series. We could see the literal rise of Valyria. The main points in the series description is we will learn horrifying secrets from Westeros history, the true origin of the White Walkers, Starks of legend, and mysteries of the East. This, in my opinion, is likely another multi-continent story like Game of Thrones. So we will likely be following characters both in Essos and in Westeros. The title of The Long Night and then Bloodmoon and knowing about the mysteries of the East being a part of the series is really intriguing to me for many different reasons. Firstly, this signals that they could possibly be doing some Yi Great Empire of the Dawn, Bloodstone Emperor, Gemstone Emperor type of thing. Like, I'm hoping for that. The interesting thing about this is the Great Empire of the Dawn is basically where many people theorize that the Valyrians come from. It's believed by many in the fandom that Daenerys is actually a descendant of the Gemstone Emperors, which is hinted at in her Wake the Dragon dream, and we know the legend of the origin of the dragons. The moon was an egg Khaleesi, it wandered too close to the sun, yada yada, and now we have a prequel called Bloodmoon. All the dragon lore in the Wake the Dragon dream. I've talked about it before. I will link the podcast episode that I talked about it in. Now, the long night being caused in the East is definitely not the story we think we know, but let's focus on the story we think we know and where the timeline truly begins. Every time Martin talks about the timeline, he references inaccurate histories. But the coming of the First Men, that's kind of where the timeline begins. Westeros is inhabited by the Children of the Forest, and the First Men allegedly cross a land bridge in Dorne, and that's how they come to Westeros. So we got some pictures that have leaked from filming that actually show Viking-type ships with wolf banners on them, Stark banners. So while this could be the coming of the First Men on ships, I would think that it is not. One, the First Men didn't come on ships. They came on the land bridge from the Arm of Dorne, and the children broke the Arm of Dorne. So the breaking of the Arm of Dorne, which is a major thing that happens between the Children of the Forest and the First Men, wouldn't happen if the First Men came on ships. Or would it? Secondly, the direwolf thing with the Starks and their direwolves likely happens after the Children of the Forest teach them to warg, because the direwolf is a very northern animal relative to the north of Westeros and not Essos, at least to my knowledge, unless the Starks brought the wolves with them from Essos. I don't know. So it would be kind of out of place for me for the First Men to arrive not only on ships but with Stark direwolf banners on said ships. As you know, I believe the timeline is fucked up. I believe the Andals were around during the Long Night. So I would actually love if these ships actually belonged to Theon Stark, and we get to see the Battle of Weeping Water against the Andals. Theon Stark was vicious. He was the king of winter. After the Battle of the Weeping Water, Theon sailed across the narrow sea to Andalos with the Andal commander's body on the prow of his ship, and he also displayed heads on spikes all along the northern coastlines. Like, he put their heads up there like, come through, what's good, you see how I roll, do you want your head up here? I hope it's Theon Stark, but like, I'm not sure that it's Theon Stark, because the Age of Heroes will kind of be more of the Brandon the Builder era. But George did give us some information in an interview with Entertainment Weekly. We talk about the 7 kingdoms of Westeros. There were 7 kingdoms at the time of Aegon's conquest, Martin says. But if you go back further, then there are 9 kingdoms and 12 kingdoms, and eventually you get back to where there are 100 kingdoms. Petty kingdoms, and that's the era that we're talking about here. So in the prequel, there are 100 kingdoms. There are marsh kings and river kings, the kings in the north, kings in every damn corner. So it's going to be a lot of kings, and they're going to be politicking. The Starks will definitely be there, he said. And while much has been made about the fact the prequel predates dragons, that doesn't mean there won't be other creatures. Obviously, the White Walkers are here, or as they're called in my books, the others. That will be an aspect of it, Martin says. There are things like direwolves and mammoths. Direwolves and mammoths and Starks, 100% in the prequel. Noted. But I'm really just not ready to give up on dragons. Will we have dragons in season 1? Probably not. But as the story progresses and we get deeper and deeper, I definitely think we could see the rise of Valyria and dragons. Nobody does dragons like HBO. So I'm holding on to hope for dragons. George also said Casterly Rock will be featured, but the series predates Lannisters, so we will actually have the Casterlys living in Casterly Rock and not the Lannisters, which may make room for Lan the Clever to make an appearance. I'm really excited, though, for Bloodmoon, or whatever this show is going to be called, because Bloodmoon is a working title. I need these White Walker answers, these Children of the Forest answers. I need the real tea. I'm ready to see the Children of the Forest in action, the Kings of Winter, the wars between the First Men and the Children of the Pack. I'm ready to see the coming of the Andals. I'm ready to see the real timeline. I'm ready to see all of the story that isn't the one we think we know. But what do you think? Are you excited for Bloodmoon? As always, thanks for watching. Thanks to everyone that supports me on Patreon. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Please click that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and join the Sweet Summer family. Okay, my sweet summer children, have a good day.
Shame.